All right, so today we're with Tommy Sewall. He's the director of Word of Life youth camps in Scroon Lake, New York. And just real quick, I'm familiar with Word of Life, grew up around it, but as I've gotten out of that circle and walked around the country and in the world, I realized, oh, not everybody knows what Word of Life is. So fill us in real quick on Word of Life, how camps fit in, your role, all of that.
Sure, yeah. Word of Life is an international youth ministry. We focus on helping students take the next step in their faith. It's kind of like the boil it all down to one thing. That's what we're focused on. There's kind of there's a couple like main entities inside of Word of Life. I'm involved in the camping one, and camping is a really big part of what we do at Word of Life here in New York, in Florida, and then all around the world. Camping is a big part of it. Also, we have our Bible Institute, which the main campus is right here in Scroon Lake. We've got about 400 students on campus, and we have just a 2-year freshman sophomore program, fully accredited but non-degree granting. So students can come here, build a biblical foundation for life on mission, and then they can transfer out if they want to get a degree, or they can kind of go on with whatever they're going to do, but they've got that biblical foundation. That's a really big part of what we do. And we have another kind of branch of the ministry that's really focused on the local church, providing youth ministries with things like curriculum, tools like the Word of Life Quiet Time Diary is a really popular one, putting on events in the local church or at least away from here, kind of our main campuses. So those would be kind of the 3 main things that Word of Life does. And then there was like kind of the 4th element, which is just all of the 3 of those things internationally. And so we're, I think what we're saying right now is we're in over 80 countries. It's like we're at 81 or 82, kind of like you kind of plus or minus that on any given day, just the nature of, of where we're at. But yeah, I think we're about 80 countries around the world doing one of those 3 things. And in some countries doing all of them many times over. In some countries, it would just be, maybe they just have a camp or a discipleship training program or something like that. But that's what Word of Life is in a nutshell. We on the island, which is the teen camp that I direct in the summer, we just celebrated 75 years 2 summers ago. So in Word of Life's, I think, about 5 or 6 years older than that as a ministry. So yeah, that's a little bit about Word of Life.
Awesome. And so a couple of points or thoughts in my mind with Word of Life, with the Bible Institute. One of the unique things about it is that students don't just do class. All of them are involved throughout the year in different ways in some of those other ministry experiences, right? How does that look?
Yeah, so that's definitely one of the hallmarks about our program is the hands-on ministry experience. That is the way that I describe it to people is it's not extracurricular. It's not like come here to study, and then we also think it's a good idea for you to get experience, and so you should do that. It's like built into it. Our students, we have a Tuesday through Friday class schedule. Monday is a day off, and that's because most of our students are involved in some sort of ministry on the weekend. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we have a lot of our students are directly plugged into local churches here, serving there. We have music teams. Even our sports teams here are ministry first and a sports team second. And so we've had, now I'm just going to, I don't remember this number exactly, but I want to say we've had 15 or 18 athletes put their faith in Jesus this year from opposing teams, because it's one of the things that we say we're playing for the right to be able to share our faith after the game's over. And that's whenever that is allowed. And that's something that our athletes are doing, is sharing their testimony, sharing the gospel, and leading, opposing teammates or opposing players to Jesus, right, on the field or court. So that experience is really a key part of what we do here. I use this illustration to say it'd be like if you went to a school to learn how to fly airplanes, and they said, We're so glad you're here. This is the classroom part. And then what you're going to need to do is go out and find somebody who will let you fly their airplane in order to actually learn this. Because no one would feel comfortable getting onto an airplane where that pilot had just sat in a classroom his whole time. But what we do at Word of Life is we're saying we're going to teach you in the classroom, but also we're going to teach you, we're going to give you the experience. Like, we own a bunch of airplanes. We are an international youth ministry, and so we can put those two things together and make it all one learning experience, versus a lot of other schools where it's like, sign up for your ministry, and who even knows what that ministry is and how connected it is to what you're learning in the classroom and anything like that. So it's a really unique thing of the program here.
Yeah. And, and I want to talk about the internship in a bit, get to that. And especially as it intersects with your experience and your role and that sort of thing. But that really is one of those unique dynamics working in higher ed ministry, and those collision points for me when I think about Word of Life and about the conversations we've had, the relationship, the opportunity to connect and collaborate in different ways. That is a very, very unique opportunity to, like you say, actually get in, pull the levers, fly the plane while you're learning, as opposed to the later. And you just don't get that. In our world, I talk about bolt-on experience, or bolting education onto experience versus integration, and that's a pretty significant part. So I know for us, when we have students that have gone through Word of Life and step into internships and different parts of Anchor or our Summit or the other partners, there's just a different level of, I've been here before and I've stood in this space, that is a higher floor to work from as you start building. You're not starting from the basement and working up. So that's pretty significant. Before we get to all of that, you have a pretty long personal history with Word of Life. Why don't you talk a little bit about your story, where you came from, and how you ended up where you're at?
Sure. Yeah. So I've grown up in and around Word of Life really my whole life. My parents work for Word of Life still. They live and work down in Florida now at our campus down there. But so I've been around Word of Life. I've been around ministry. My dad, interestingly enough, is he's a construction, behind the scenes, operations, logistics. He is the last place he would ever be is stepping foot on a stage, delivering a message. He's a great leader, but he's behind the scenes, and really has most of his career at Word Life has been in buildings, in operations. And so that's kind of where I grew up, was behind the scenes, and got my, kind of have an odd amount of construction experience for where I'm at currently. People always raise an eyebrow because, we have some heavy equipment here at Word Life, and when need be, I'll jump in and operate it. And everyone's kind of like, is this okay? It's like, what they don't know is that the excavator belonged to my dad before it belonged to Word Life. Like, I've been driving that longer than, so anyways, it's kind of a funny little sidebar about some of that. But I grew up kind of behind the scenes, and but I always grew up around camp, loved camp, and it was really important to my dad. He was always bringing me to camp from a young age, to the meetings where we were seeing, campers put their faith in Jesus and respond. It was important for him to see that, because that kind of kept him going, being behind the scenes, and it made a profound impact on me from a young age. Kind of grew up doing a lot, obviously around camp, worked a lot of jobs in camp. I've spent a summer at every Word of Life camp. Really actually cut my teeth in camp out in California. We used to run 2 weeks of camp in Northern California every summer. And I went out there for 6 years, all 4 years in high school and 2 years in college for those 2 weeks, and got a lot of young leadership experience out there. And where I spent summers working in the kitchen, spent a lot of summers driving boats, and kind of always just behind the scenes, and started out at our children's camp in California, on the platform a little bit, leading some of the games and activities and stuff, and had some really key people invest in me from a leadership perspective. And kind of one of the hallmarks of Word of Life is I feel like we take young people and we trust them with a lot. We kind of give them a lot of responsibility, and maybe even recklessly so sometimes, but it's a great way to learn. And so that, I feel like that kind of happened with me a little bit, and ended up attending the Bible Institute, which is our 1-year program here. And at that point really felt like just the Lord was leading me into youth ministry. And I thought what that meant was to be a youth pastor. So I finished my 1 year here at the Bible Institute, went down to Clark Summit University, as it's now known, and studied in the youth ministry program there for the next 2.5 years. I kind of just took as many classes as I could and finished a semester early. And at that point was still fully set on thinking I was going to be a youth pastor. Kind of thought I knew where I was going to go for that. And that kind of fell through right at the end of my time at CSU. And one of the guys who had really poured into me as a high schooler was one of our camp directors. And he said, well, why don't you come back and work with me in camp? And the truth is, at this point in my life, I'm not proud of this, but I was kind of at this point where I was like, I don't really know if camp ministry, and youth ministry, like camp's a lot of fun. I know that. I wasn't fully bought in on the true raw power of it in the life of a student. But I really respected this guy and knew it would be a great opportunity for me to grow personally as a leader. So I went back, started working in snow camp that year, and in just a few weeks, it was like the Lord just opened up my heart to the significant impact that was happening in the lives of these students. And I would say for me, it was like this switch flipped, and it was like I went from being kind of skeptical of it to just like fully sold out on it. It's like, this is incredible. Camp is powerful, and it's working hand in hand with the local church and providing a great opportunity for students who are in a youth group to come here and in a different environment with kind of different voices and different scenery, really hear from the Lord. And that was it. That kind of switched for me, and still doing youth ministry, just not in the way that I had always pictured it, kind of for a lot of high school. And so I started out kind of in some lower level positions. I was program coordinator and I was assistant camp director for a few years. And I think I was 26 and they asked me to lead the island and snow camp. And I always tell people, like, I to this day still think it was maybe just like a cruel experiment, that they were like, what would happen if we just let this, like 26-year-old guy be in charge of all this? I was like, it could be good, it could be bad. Let's just try it and find out. And some of it was good and some of it was bad. And, I learned a lot, and grateful now to have been doing that. 2016 was when that happened. So for quite a number of years now, and loving it. More into it today than I ever have been.
Awesome. So describe the range of the year for you and pretty much everybody in camp ministry, and every ministry is a little bit different in rhythms, but describe the seasons, the things you're doing, and what that looks like from a leadership perspective, responsibility, et cetera.
Yeah. So our two main camp seasons in the summer were kind of June, July, and then a good chunk of August. Kind of flip-flops a little bit year to year, whether we're 2 or 3 weeks in August. But June, July, August, I'm actually literally living on an island with about 10 other full-time staff members and their families. And we run teen camp on the island for 8 weeks of camp. It's about 10 weeks that we live over there. And then in the winter, kind of January, February, March, we have 7 weekends that we're running winter camp. And then the 2 off seasons, you've got the fall and the spring. I travel a lot. Word of Life does other events, and so I've been out on the road for the last month helping run some big evangelistic events that we do. Also recruiting counselors. I was at the Liberty Camp Fair in October, I guess it was. And then just relationships, ministry is relationships. And so a lot of that is just going out and building relationships with youth pastors, with people who are supporters of the ministry. And so I would say on average, I'm probably on the road 10 to 15 weekends in the fall and in the spring. In the spring, we do more events. Something that we're kind of getting into is video gaming. We're passionate about reaching students, and this generation of students likes to play video games. And so we've been kind of on a journey to put it together an event that brings those two things together. And so that's been a big thing in the spring. And so kind of 2 travel seasons, 2 seasons where I'm in camp mode on the island. And then our winter camp does not happen on the island. It happens here on our college campus.
And then for summer camp in particular, you have a staff of recruit. How big is that staff on the island of college kids that are serving?
Yeah, so we've got kind of 3 different tiers of staff. We've got our full-time staff, or our like full-time, part-time. There's about 30 in that group. And then we would have our college students, which are almost all students who are currently enrolled here at the Bible Institute. In the last 3 years, we've started to recruit at Liberty and Cedarville, primarily our alumni, because we are sending out 50, 60 students a year to both those schools. And we're trying to recruit them to come back. But we would have about 200, or I guess maybe not 200, on a good year, 200. We're probably 160 college students this summer. And then we have our third level, which is we have high schoolers that come and they volunteer for the summer. And they're a part of kind of, it's really a discipleship program that uses working at camp as the curriculum for the discipleship. And so they're the ones doing our kitchen, our beach, our high ropes. And so we would have, for example, in our high ropes course, we would have 2 college students and we would have 6 high schoolers, and they're responsible for the ropes course all summer. Those 2 college students are discipling the 6 high school students, and they're part of what makes that so effective is they're together, they're working, the ups and downs of all of that give them great opportunity to, it's hard to kind of fake it for a summer when you're in that environment. So it really kind of gives them a chance to help them grow in their faith. And so, and we have we would hope to have 100 high schoolers in that. Whether or not we can recruit them all, it's been more challenging probably in the last 5 years. But so we're about 250 staff when we're fully staffed up.
And which is that's a big number when you talk about that many young people running around.
It's pretty funny too, because there's like 3 people on our staff that are like over the age of 40. It's like easily the median age in the summer on the island is 17 or 18 of our staff. It's part of what makes it special. You can tell when you go over there. It's just like everybody here wants to have fun, and it's high energy, and it's a cool thing.
And how many campers is that group serving during the course of a normal summer?
This last summer we had just under 2,400 campers over the course of our 8 weeks. So I think our goal this summer is closer to 2,700. So between our elementary, middle school, and high school camps, Our goal is in the next 5 years to serve 6,000 campers in one summer. So this last summer we were right at like 4,400 between those three camps.
Wow. And you said something I want to tie back into for the next kind of line of thought or inquiry I have for you. In the middle of all of that, you're serving a bunch of high school kids week to week. So you're building new relationships, all of that. You've got high school kids serving in those functioning roles, but they're also being discipled as a key. You said it's a discipleship program where we serve at camp, as opposed to we're serving at camp and trying to figure out how to disciple in between.
Right.
I think that's a fundamental. That's a fundamental marker, because camp is hair on fire. Like, anybody who's been around it and even just stood next to it and watched it is like, okay, those people don't sleep. Especially when you're talking about young people, staff, and who you're serving. But that kind of connects into in the pace of all of that. I know a lot of your story and how we've intersected, but you decided in the middle of all that, maybe in spite of all that, to hop into a master's program. Talk a little bit about your thought process, because most people would say you're probably crazy.
Yeah.
How that's intersected with that dynamic.
Sure. So I'll say right out of the gate, I was never a good student. In high school, in college, my mom would say that I was capable of so much more, and that I always just I was just okay with like getting by, because I was focused on, I wanted to have fun. I wanted to play sports. Whatever grades I needed to stay eligible for the soccer team was, that was what I was aiming for. And I kind of finished my undergrad, like, thank goodness that's over. I loved a lot of my youth ministry classes, and other than that, I endured it. And so, I'd always kind of heard, and some of the leadership had been like, well, we want you to think about getting your master's. And I was just always like, oh my goodness, like I'll push that off as long as I can. And kind of as time went on, I was like, I should probably consider doing this. I had a conversation with somebody, and it was actually the guy who doesn't work at our organization anymore, but it was the guy that helped me, develop me as a leader. And that the reason I started working in camp, I was talking to him about, I don't know what I should do about this. I'm so busy. I at the time had a 3-year-old with one on the way, and I'm turning in just like crazy hours. And he said, you're only going to get busier. He was like, right now your 3-year-old goes to bed at what? And then it's like 7. It's like, yeah, in 5 years, that's going to be 9. In 10 years, you're going to be not only at home, you're going to be at sporting events. You're going to, it's like, I kind of just had this moment of like, there's a lot of truth to that. I feel busy right now, but my schedule still has some margin in it compared to where I can see this going. And so at that point, I was like, all right, I should take advantage of this time that I have. And although it's a little bit, it's probably more than I will have in the future. And so I started searching and looking around, and you and I had a conversation 10 or so years ago, and we had talked about the learning model that you use. And so that, I always kind of had that in the back of my mind. And as I started looking and kind of looking at all the options, it's like, I just can't, I had such a hesitation about signing on to a just like kind of run of the mill master's degree program, just because I knew, first of all, this is going to really rub against what I'm doing right now. And I know that this other model exists out there in the world. And I just feel like I'm going to, just have a hard time taking this kind of just standardized thing when I know that what I'm doing right now already has so much value to it. And that's kind of, when we got connected again, and it's like, found out about Anchor and everything that was going on. And it's been super helpful to me, the way that it's designed versus the traditional, like education model. I can't say enough about how much I've enjoyed it, about how easy it's been to integrate. Now, I'm not a reader, but I had already developed that discipline. And so the difference for me was now I'm just not reading the books necessarily that I want, which makes it sound bad. I enjoy all the books that I'm reading for my class. It's just I'm told, okay, here's the books for this class, and that part was not hard at all. I have that as a rhythm already, and the other work on that has come with it has been, I've enjoyed doing it. It's been helpful. It's been, and there's some flexibility. Dwight, my professor, has been willing to help me out when I just came out of this last month of, where I've been on the road equal number of days to at home, and the days on the road are full. He's been understanding of that, and I can say that is definitively not true for some of my friends who are in traditional educational programs, who are pulling their hair out trying to do both things at once. And I always kind of look at them like, there's a way that both things are one. That's what I'm doing at Anchor.
Well, and to catch people up that maybe aren't super familiar with what we do in the learning model, we built, whether master's degree, undergrad, whatever, is designed to take the content of a course, the books, the reading, whatever learning inputs, the context, which is the ministry environment, roles, responsibilities, rhythms, all of that, and then coaching from the instructor. So not paper grading, but coaching, walking alongside, building with, and bringing them together into the same space so that what God's doing on the front line is the thing that's being amplified with skill development, and all of it's aligned really well with structured outcomes and framework, that sort of thing. So somebody like yourself can say, okay, what I'm doing doesn't have to compete with what I'm learning. In fact, if it's competing with what I'm learning, something's not quite going right. We're trying to not just get them to play nicely next to each other, but to really collaborate and bounce off of each other. And that's the model. So that's the easiest way, I think, to describe it.
Yeah.
So for you, I'm sure there's like different things you can kind of cherry pick as it relates to how maybe a class or a set of classes has intersected with some of the challenges in front of you. But is there anything that kind of hops into the front of your mind to say, oh, here's a story that shows how this has worked for me?
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite things is there is no fake work. There's no scenario. Everything that I've done, all the projects for every class that I've done, I have, is real world stuff. There's been, one of the things is I took a class on emotional intelligence, and which I admittedly wasn't even a part of my vocabulary headed into that class. But the final project I turned in was a class that then I taught to our counselors on emotional intelligence, because what I learned through the course of all that class was this is really important stuff, and especially for camp counselors. Like the way I explained it to our students was a counselor with a high EQ, the measurement of emotional intelligence, is a better counselor. And so here's walk them through. Here's a class on, not class like, we're talking about a 1 hour block, but walking them through, giving some of that practical advice to them. Another really cool one that worked out was a class on strategic thinking. At the same time as I had been tasked from our CEO with developing a strategic plan for the island, and kind of both those coming at the same time. And so what that allowed me to do was, I'm doing this big project for our CEO, and I'm getting coached on it from my professor the whole way through. And every conversation I have about it is both equal parts for this class, but also for this project that I'm working on. And that ended up turning into a really, really awesome final project that, it was in that case, I felt like submitting it in my class was kind of like, yeah, that's good. But like handing this to the CEO and knowing that this was the amount of work that had gone into it, the coaching that had gone into it, the books that had been read that helped formulate it all just made me feel really confident in it. And we actually turned it into then like a little pamphlet that we gave to all of our staff and we gave to guests who were coming onto our property. It was an awesome project. So that's probably the one that was like the way that was lined up wasn't. I didn't know that was coming from our CEO. It was just kind of the next class in line, but it worked out really really well. And really all of them, like I said, I haven't done any work that's not been real world, and I think my team would tell you that in the last year and a half that I've been doing this, or however long it's been, it all kind of washes together.
Almost to the finish line.
I'm getting close. I'm really almost there. But I think they would tell you that they have noticed a profound difference in my leadership to them, just as directly as a result of the classes that I'm taking, the work that I'm doing. They've been a part of some of the projects that I've been doing research and kind of that, whether they know it or not, they've been a part of quite a few of the projects that I've done. So yeah, it's been incredibly helpful, and I've even thought to myself, like, maybe like this has added so much value. I need to, even if I've got some of my team members that don't have their sights set on the full degree, it would just be so helpful for them, even if they just took a class, and the framework well, but the framework that every class builds around, I think that framework is so helpful. I find myself going back to that even outside of the class that I'm particularly taking, just because it just sets you up so well for asking questions, evaluating where growth is, you know, the way that you set up, this is where we want to get to, and how we ask questions about how we're going to get there. All that's been super helpful.
Awesome. And that's great to hear, because that's the idea in the design. I sit on this end of it, right? And try to put people in a position to win, in how we build the relationships and whatnot. But that's exactly the idea. I mean, I think there's a lot of education that happens where we're informing and then testing later. But when you get in the real world, there's a question like, hey, build a strategy, or hey, whatever. And it's not like, the kid that likes to keep his peas and his mashed potatoes and the things on his plate separate. Everything's kind of mashed together.
Mm-hmm.
And those questions come in real time in the real world. And when the process you use to break them down, engage, say, what's the win look like? All of that really, the learning blueprint framework that we developed, we use is a real world. How do I learn, grow, solve, generate outcomes in a strategic way approach, and it works. And one of the things with the journal, which is weekly journal rhythms, that I say to people that I'm training in using it, or even ministry leaders that are going to be mentoring students going through it, is if we can train, like in the first time through, students are journaling what happened last week, and you can tell that they're thinking right now about what happened last week. The second time through the class, or a little bit farther down the road in the second class, you can tell by reading what they're writing that they were actually thinking about it in real time. And then the third cycle through, you can actually see them anticipating what's coming up. And so what's happening is they're not just doing a rhythm, they're building a skill. And you see that developing in real time, and that touches, impacts, amplifies everything else. And so every part of the process is kind of set up to do that. So it's good to hear that that's actually functioning for you in that way, and with your team. So that, for me, then kind of turns a corner, because we've got your season's finishing as a student in the system at this point, coming up this next semester. But you've got an intern that's starting and working in the system as an undergrad student, did 2 years at Word of Life, and is now an intern under you at Word of Life camps. And so you're pivoting to use that framework in a coaching role alongside an instructor who's offsite at this point, and that'll kind of grow into something very integrated on-site. So first of all, explain a little bit about the Word of Life internship program, because that's a global opportunity for students coming out of the institute.
Yeah. So, any given year, we're looking at 200 students that are finishing either the freshman or sophomore year, because you can come here for just the 1 year. Some choose to add on the second year, but we're sending those students out, and we have come up with several different internship opportunities for them. One of them is right here. We call it our camp ministry internship. And so we've got 5 students right now that have stayed on. They are full-time students, and then they are with us kind of in the afternoon and on the weekends right here in our office, and then all through our camp season as well. We also have our cross-cultural internship, which is where the international part of our ministry comes into play. And so we have, and I'm not as familiar with this one, but if I had to guess, we've probably got 60 students right now, either in their junior or senior year, that are someplace overseas. They are also full-time students. They have to be enrolled in some sort of school, but they are overseas learning that culture, learning that language, and serving in ministry while they're also studying. And then we have, very similar to those two, our youth ministry internship, where we have students that are same thing, fully enrolled as a student, but they are someplace serving in the local church, getting that hands-on experience. Honestly, a lot of them end up being, some of them are where there's a full-time youth leader and they're kind of a part of a team. But most of them are at a church, and they're the guy. They're just not, it's like they're getting all the learning experience without without having to be fully on the hook for it, if that makes sense. Like it's a nice balance for them out to get that experience. So we've got a lot of students every year that are rolling into an internship of some sort. And I'm really excited about Luke, who has, he's in a part of our camp ministry internship, studying through Anchor. And again, just to be able to, it's such a stark contrast, because our other students are enrolled in, kind of the more traditional online school, and to be able to see the difference in how, I'm not going to say, I'll say easier. It's only easier because, again, the work is, it's like one of the things that we want Luke to do as a part of our discipleship, or as a part of our internship, is we want him to have a group of guys that he's discipling that are either freshmen or sophomore students. That's happening no matter what, no matter what class he's taking. That's a requirement of our internship. Well, it fits in really well with the classes that he's taking on at Anchor, and he's able to now take this thing that he has to do already, that's rich with learning opportunities. There's a lot to learn about yourself, about helping other people grow in their faith, and he's able to really, I think, glean from that all the learning that's there, because he's got, like you've said, he's got a coach now. He's got somebody who's got a whole life's worth of experience speaking directly into that. And those two things are the same. Everybody else is still doing this, but they're over here checking off and doing fake projects and, doing a bunch of, probably their professors wouldn't feel like it, but just kind of fluff work in a lot of ways, just to try to, complete some, class, over here. So it's working out great for him.
Awesome. But it's having been on different in different roles and in different angles of the distance learning space, when you're creating something from a course perspective that has to have everything built, all the rhythms, whatever, but you have no idea if the learner is an adult in the military in Okinawa, or a kid that's sitting in his mom's basement, playing video games and then interspersing with whatever their work. You don't have any context. You don't have the opportunity to anticipate or even build into those dynamics, some of those levers. Whereas we have the opportunity regularly to have conversations. You're in touch with Luke's professor. He's also connected to you. personally,
Mm-hmm.
understands Word of Life and all of that, and have those conversations, say, how do we best leverage this so Luke grows, as opposed to how do we get through a set of rhythms so we can assess it, put a grade at the end of it. So it's just a different approach and opportunities. And for us, for me, it's been fun to connect with you and kind of Word of Life more broadly, thinking about global and whatnot, and to learn the unique dynamics and the things that are the same as other places we maybe work with, and ask the question, okay, how do we come in and help amplify, not replace, not distract, not come around or whatever, but amplify, sit underneath what you're doing. So that's good to hear. That's working out with Luke, and we anticipate, I don't know how much, like once you graduate, you'll be qualified to instruct courses, all of that you'll have a greater role in that. Obviously, you got to be careful about how much you take on, but one of those dynamics that I find fun in your situation specifically is you do have a grad student, undergrad student, and potentially, the instructor role kind of pulls into that native environment. As you've thought about next steps, and we talk about getting other people involved in the process, whether it's for credit or not, what's your vision moving forward for how you leverage with interns, just even the opportunities there?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, every intern has to sit in my office and listen to me talk about the value of Anchor, because because it's not just, I don't believe, just helpful to them. It's helping. It's more beneficial to me. And our other interns are doing a great job discipling their students, but they don't have the advantage that Luke's currently got, because he's really pressing into this. He's journaling about it. He's interacting with his professor about it. He's reading about it. All those things are contributing to it. So it's not just helpful for them, it's helpful for us. And so they've all got to listen to me talk about that. And I'm excited to continue to be a part of it however I can, certainly in balance, of everything in my of everything going on. But I'm a believer in it wholeheartedly, in the system and how it works, in the way that it creates learning opportunities around what's already existing, and what is already rich with lessons to be learned, to glean those out. I just think I'm all in on it. And it was actually pretty funny. I just sat down across from Luke last year at lunch, and I knew he was going to be a part of the internship. And I just said, what are you thinking about for school? And, he kind of listed off some kind of generic plan. And I was like, well, I want you to think about something else, because I think this would be helpful to you, and kind of put in place, the right steps to happen to get him to where he is now. And I'm excited about that. And hopefully, you and I have talked. I just think it's valuable and would have a ton of value across all those internships I talked about. And I think that's going to just be a part of the future, as more and more students realize, like, this is a better way to learn.
All right. So that said, I appreciate that. We'll end the extended Anchor Christian University infomercial. That wasn't planned that way. It just happened. But thinking forward, obviously you've got a history, trajectory, and you grew up with Word of Life. You got to see it from underneath. And sometimes, like, there's a lot of us that grew up as ministry kids that see what's under the hood and decide that's not so much for me, for one reason or another. But you have a journey through your childhood under your dad's direction and shepherding. You do the BI, you go to Clark Summit, you have a plan, God redirects it a little bit. And I'm sure in the years that you've had in the different roles at Word of Life, there are different kind of turning points and whatnot. So I still look at you and say, oh, you're a young leader, because I'm older than you are. But you're in the process already of mobilizing generations of young leaders behind you because of the culture DNA and who you are. But that said, if you were to talk to your 19-year-old self, what advice would you give him as it relates to attitude, perspectives, actions moving forward, not knowing the road?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good question. The number one thing that comes straight into my mind is, and this is something that I tell our leaders all the time, our young leaders here, like our 18, 19-year-old, is you have to be a learner first and foremost. And, I talked about, I wasn't really a good student. I just kind of coasted. I got the grades that I needed to, but I was not hungry for learning. I read only what I had to read. And as I then finished school, was like, yes, I don't have to read a book. Then I start working for this leader, and that leader was like, he would say, leaders are readers. What book are you reading? And I'd be like, you need to be reading a book. Here, you need to give me a book. And he was he's an intense guy, and I was always afraid that he would see me and ask me about what I had read, and I wouldn't be able to give an answer. And so I would read every night a little bit, because I was afraid that my boss was going to catch me not reading. And that slowly turned into a habit for me. And I feel like what started for me at probably 24, 25, I wish I could go back at 18 and start, and see, just give myself to learning and growing, because then what I've seen come from that's just been incredible. I've been, on a really deep dive into Generation Z and now Generation Alpha coming behind them. That's been so helpful and has really, I feel like given me a lot of really great insight into current state ministry. And it's like, man, I wish I had known that was a thing years ago, the difference between generations. And so that would be a big one, would be just like, just double down on learning, and not just learning about things that you're interested in, but like everybody I meet now, I think like I can learn something from you. There's like a guy who works in our ministry. He's like a maintenance guy, but he was a helmsman on an aircraft carrier, in the Navy. It's like, but I got something to learn from you, like that's a cool thing. And like every time I see him, I like save up my questions for him, so that I can be around when I'm around him. I can just get all my, questions answered. But that's something that I've had to learn later in life. Like everybody that I meet there's something I can learn from them. And I wish I'd known that earlier and spent more time learning from other people earlier. Yeah, and I don't know too. The second thing, and this would kind of be the last one I would say, is this is really hard even for our students now. It's like when you're in school, you're always thinking about the future, and especially when you're in school for ministry, undergrad, you're thinking like, I'm in a class about leadership, but I'm not a leader right now. I'm a student. This is going to be for when I'm, a leader. And I wish I could have told myself what I tell our students now. It's like, you are equally, God has you where you're at right now to do his work to the same degree that he will when you finish school. It's not like you're in a holding pattern as far as God's design for you and ministry and the Great Commission, like all of that's equally relevant in where you're at right now as it's going to be when you're done. And so don't get caught like I did thinking I'm just in a holding pattern on actually doing this stuff. I just have to check all these boxes and then I can go do it. It's like, no, you're doing it now. Your life on mission is right now, and it's when you graduate. So I miss that dynamic a little bit.
That's awesome. I think about what that does for when you do step into something where you recognize that you're learning, because it creates demand. Like when you're stepping into a place where maybe you don't feel ready, or you're just standing in the shoes you're in, and the things are, questions are coming at you, needs, etc. It creates a vacuum or demand on learning, which makes learning more fun. whether it's fun or not, productive and, not a chore or labor. It's something that you grow with, like you actually metabolize. So it's awesome. It's interesting with this generation of young people, because I have those conversations. I don't know where I'm headed, or I know where I want to head, but I'm not sure how to get there. I had one of those just before we hopped on this this conversation. And more I don't even know where I'm standing, let alone how to envision where I'm going. That gray or black area in there for students is kind of paralyzing, or for young people is kind of paralyzing. And I think that message of, where you're at right now, look around, there's something to do right now with real impact and real value, not just, down the road is significant, because it gives purpose for now. Like it highlights the purpose that you've been given for now, but it also actually helps to start taking steps, because that's where you begin realizing, oh, if you, to your point in your story, if you hadn't gone back to camp and stood in that place after school and started seeing God work in that season in that way, then your heart and mind for camp as a mission and ministry for you wouldn't have been sparked in the same way. So I think in every season, it's helpful to stand in those shoes, look around and say, okay, what's God doing right now? And how do I step in?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, and it's good to hear from you, because you're doing a ton and having an impact all the time. So that said, I want to honor your time. I really appreciate you taking time. I always enjoy our conversations. I feel like I learn and grow, and it's an encouragement to me. So thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, no.
Blessings on next steps and stuff.
Thank you. Stoked to be a part of it, and appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll catch up with you soon. Thanks, Tommy.